This is David Hakan with KC Cafe Radio at the Gypsy Wagon Studios in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm here with Dan Boling, who is one of the artists that attend the Folk Alliance conferences to showcase their original music. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you for having me, David. How you been?
I've been good. So tell us about when you first learned that your tours and shows would be canceled because of the pandemic.
Well, I was on tour. I'd been on tour for almost 2 months and had 2 weeks left to go. And I was in Mississippi heading for Florida. And we realized that the Mississippi show was not going to be able to happen because the church that was hosting it had decided they couldn't have crowds.
Oh,
And
wow.
I contacted the last gig of the tour, which was clear back down in Florida, and said, I know you folks are still on the fence about whether to go ahead or not, but I'm not feeling real good about driving all the way down to Florida only to find out that on the way you decided, or the church where you host decided it wasn't going to happen. And so we canceled, and sure enough, about 24 hours later, the church that they use canceled everything for the rest of the year. So Ellen and I hot-footed at home 2 weeks early, and Ellen has not left the house since. And I've gone out to forage for groceries as carefully as possible and come back and decontaminate. And meanwhile, of course, just like every other singer-songwriter out there, my schedule for me as a solo and for the Limelighters trio is completely wiped out. We still have a few dates later this year, but I'm dubious as to whether those are actually going to get to happen or not. We're just going to have to wait and see.
Uncertainty is the new normal.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about your background in music.
Well, how far back you want to go? My mama was an amateur folk singer, and we grew up singing around my house, my sisters and I, in the, let's see, when it would have been 63, 64, we were living in Misawa, Japan, where my father was stationed with the Air Force, and my mother had her very own television show on Armed Forces Television called Mother Hubbard's Cupboard.
I love it.
She played folk songs for groups of elementary school kids and read books and such, and so I was steeped in folk music at a very early age, and then about 5th or 6th grade I discovered my mother's unused guitar in the attic, and started playing it, and playing covers of old folk songs mostly, and then starting to play things I was hearing on the radio. And by about middle of high school, I was writing songs. Fortunately, none of those have survived. But then in college, I started playing out in clubs and started writing more actively. And I went on to do a National Park Service and Bureau of Land Management law enforcement career and kind of tried to keep music alive on the back burner. But then I kicked it all back into gear about 20 years ago when I released my first album, a little over 20 years ago.
Great.
And then for the last dozen years, I've been out on the road full time.
Sure. So for the first song you're going to play for us, what was the spark for that song?
Well, my tours for the last several years have been interspersed with trips to Indiana to help take care of my father, who was in the long decline of Parkinson's. And so much of my songwriting in the last 4 or 5 years has centered around that relationship. And this one is one example.
Great. Let's hear that song.
Sure thing. I tried to phone my daddy, had the number halfway dialed. Seemed like I felt him pat my shoulder, and I turned around and smiled. Thought about the 1,000 times I'd call him up and say, "Hello, Papa. what'd you do today? Well, I think he'd be proud of me, how much I'm like him. But I reckon he's with Mama, now they're happy once again. He tried hard to keep on living, but you know he had to pine. 20 years alone must seem the longest time. How do we go on without the people that we love? One foot after the other, no, they always wait for us. Face tomorrow, come tomorrow, slip the yoke of yesterday. All that matters is what you do today. My wife and I are getting older, our kids are grown and gone. We wish they always could go with us for this journey that we're on. They live their own lives and it thrills me when one calls me up to say, hello, Papa. What'd you do today? How do we go on without the people that we love? One foot after the other, no, they always wait for us. Face tomorrow, come tomorrow, slip the yoke of yesterday. All that matters is what you do today. All that matters is what you do today. I tried to phone my daddy, had the number halfway dialed. Seemed like I felt him pat my shoulder, and I turned around and smiled. Hello,
Wonderful.
Papa.
Wonderful. Goosebumps. Yeah. That's a good song to do because I think that's typical of a lot of your work. That's really heartfelt.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's gotten a good response. Got to play it a few times on tour before everything stopped, and when it was screamingly new.
Yeah.
Now I'm just in that phase where I'm trying to remember how to play my songs because I'm not out performing 3 or 4 nights a week, and I'm gardening and doing projects around the house that have been sitting fallow for a dozen years waiting for me to come off the road, and I'm not playing as much music, so I have to go rehearse is what I got to do.
Exactly. So tell us about the Limelighters.
Oh, now that's been a fascinating project. Of course, the Limelighters have been around since '59. I mean, they started a year after I was born, and in all those decades, of course, people have come and gone. There's always been a Limelighters. And it's not a tribute band, it's a legacy act. Because there's always been a Limelighters, it's just people have left and passed on, and I'm the 13th member of this trio across those 61 years. But been with them a little over a year. We've done quite a few big concerts together. Some just the Limelighters, some in partnership with the Brothers Four and the Kingston Trio. And we still have a lot of them on the books. They keep being pushed further and further back into next year and the year after. So we're just all devoutly hoping that the time is going to come back in the not too distant future when large crowds of senior citizens and their parents are willing to gather again in a theater for a show, because that's really the audience for the Limelighters, folks that went to college in the 60s, you know. But it's fun. I haven't done ensemble work ever other than, you know, church choirs and school choirs. I've always been a solo act, a solo singer-songwriter. All 3 of us who are now in the Limelighters are songwriters. So in addition to making sure that we're getting the the hits, the long-term Limelighter songs right. We are also Limeliterizing songs that each of the three of us have written, so that those are now part of the catalog that the Limelighters can present, and we're having an awfully good time.
Good. Well, thanks for spending some time with us today.
My pleasure, David. Thanks for the invitation. Lovely to be here with you.
Again, this is David Hakan with KC Cafe Radio with Daniel Boling.